So this is lesson from Intro 3 on the True Bible Code website, which is called the Armageddon equation and the corruption equilibrium. And it's really about showing that unless you get the morality right, improving your technology is terminal. Because technology gives you the power to do good or bad. But if your balance between good and bad is wrong, technology hastens your path to bad, which hastens your path to the extinction of a society of free will beings, because the definition of moral sustainability is that you behave in a good way, and by which we mean a way that gives a society a future, a long-term future. So, I mean, what do we say? Is every society of reasoning beings has the capability to invent a way of destroying itself. We've done several of those. We've got the atomic bomb, we've got global warming, we've got other weapons of mass destruction, genetic and biotech getting out of control, although there's no direct evidence that that is going to be terminal to us. Certainly we can see that the nuclear weapons, we have enough to wipe ourselves out. Likewise, I think we have enough financial instruments, derivatives and the like, to wipe ourselves out economically. But then we can wipe out the planet, or at least push the planet to the point where it sneezes and wipes us out with global warming. So there's a race on with mankind. It's a race between our morality, the advancement of our morality, and the advancement of our technology. And it's a race that every intelligent society of free-willed beings who have the capability of behaving in an immoral way and yet are intelligent and reasoning will eventually get into, which is one reason why I personally believe that if we ever got invaded by an alien species with better technology than us, they would also have better morality than us, because if they didn't have that morality, they would have wiped themselves out with their superior technology, because we're at the point where our technology could wipe ourselves out. And if they have better technology, they've obviously passed that point, which means they had sufficient morality to get themselves through it. So there we are. That is the dilemma that we're in. We're in a race between moral advancement and technological advancement. And, you know, putting it in crude terms, 1,000 years ago, if someone got in a bad mood, they could get a dagger or a sword and kill 2 or 3 people before they got set upon and killed. 100 years ago, with rifles and snipers, they could maybe kill 5 or 6 or grenades. Now, with machine guns and terrorism and, well, let's say 10 years ago, they could kill 100 and have done. But imagine you get into the future where terrorists can get hold of weapons of mass destruction. They could possibly kill 50,000 or 100,000 or more. And imagine you go further into the future, when we have even more powerful weaponry and powerful technology. Then somebody could get up in a bad mood, and rather than wiping out his family or his office or the nearest shopping mall, he could take out a city. And then you go even further into the future and you reach the point where we would develop weapons, the way we've been acting hitherto, that could take out the planet. I mean, with one weapon, like in some of the Star Trek fictions, most of which are rapidly becoming a reality with the advancement of technology. So then what do you do if you have a society of 6 or maybe 60 billion free-willed beings, each one of which is capable of getting a weapon that would wipe out the whole society? They'd have to all be in a pretty good mood, or you've got no future. And this is where we have to develop as a priority a system of morality that prevents us from wiping ourselves out, and we call that sustainable morality, rather like sustainable environmental policy. We need sustainable morality. And and our dilemma can be expressed mathematically, if you find mathematical equations more easy to as a good way to depict the truth of a situation. I certainly do. And it's basically this: stability or sustainability equals morality minus technology. Okay? And that's what we call the Armageddon equation. When your morality is better than your technology, you're stable. When your morality is worse than your technology, you're unstable. So this is why scientists sometimes have conscience problems in improving our technology. Because just by improving our technology, if you fail to improve by an equal amount our morality, you are making the world a less stable place. Let me give you an illustration of this. The motor car. The motor car, let's illustrate the human survivability as a motor car staying on a road. Okay, if we're morally sustainable, we can stay on the road, the right path, shall we say. If we're not, we come off the road. Technology gives you a bigger and bigger engine in that car. Morality gives you a bigger and bigger steering wheel, or better and better power steering. If you have an incredibly powerful engine and a really useless, flimsy and unpowerful steering wheel, you are going to crash. That is the danger in advancing technology in the absence of advancing morality. And I saw this first 30 years ago when I studied to be a Jehovah's Witness, which as a church believed then, although they don't seem to believe it so much now, that the world was going to end pretty soon due to our failure to grasp God's morality. And I then took a decision to stop producing technological advancements other than computerized ones, which may not have been the right decision actually, because I feared that any technological advancement that had a military side would just make man less likely to get through the impending test, which is, can we adopt a morality which enables us to survive in the face of technology which is capable of destroying us, which we've devised. I mean, the trouble with mankind is we tend to do things only when we have to and when it's too late. And it's alright if it's too late and you've got a weapon of limited power, but when you have a weapon of unlimited power and it's too late, it's not alright. And with global warming, we don't know at what point it's too late, although apparently there was a newspaper article saying it may well become too late next year, according to some scientists, but then of course there'll be the next newspaper article saying it'll be fine next year. So, but that's the joy of the internet, isn't it? Whenever there's a story saying one thing, there's a story saying the other thing, and you have to use your own judgment to determine which is correct and which is propaganda. All of that, you don't need the Bible for that. That is just the net effect of, it's a point that every society of free will beings that is creative will eventually reach, because they will create the capability to destroy themselves. And if they have not adopted a morality to prevent themselves destroying themselves, they will indeed destroy themselves. And now, so that's the physical side. Now we'll go spiritual. Because spiritually, from the scriptures, we know the answer to this, and we know God's method of teaching us why we need to adopt sustainable morality. There's a wonderful scripture which says that to Israel, if you behave like the nations round about, with their idolatry and their adultery and everything, then the earth will vomit you out. The land will vomit you out. Now, this actually happened. They, of course, didn't listen to God and behaved just as badly as all the nations round about. And they got vomited off of their land, but not by the land doing anything. They lost in battle and were carried away into exile by the Assyrians and then the Babylonians for a period, and then after 70 years in exile they began to come back. So when you see a scripture written like that, the land will vomit you out. And when the fulfillment didn't involve any vomiting by the land, it means there's a further fulfillment in the future which will involve vomiting by the land. Now, the way that the land vomits is a volcano. That is a vomit of land, of rock, of lava, molten land. And so what the Bible is saying, if we're interpreting it correctly, is that there will come a time when not just Israel, but all of mankind behaves morally so badly that the land vomits it out. Now, you might say, what are you talking about? Does the land have some kind of, does dead rock have some kind of a moralometer? And if you do too many lies, or too much murder, or too much adultery, or too many, or get too corrupt, or do any other morally unsustainable practice, then the land says, well, you know, you're sorry, but you've exceeded the moral quota on our morality scale, therefore I'm going to have an earthquake. No, that's obviously not how it works. The other sort of naive interpretation is God just sits there and says, well, I'm fed up with this, these people are terrible, I'll give them a few volcanoes, ka-ting, ka-ting, and eventually he says, you know what, I'll wipe them all out because they're all terrible. And I don't think that's how it works either, because the land is going to vomit us out. So here would be my suggestion as to how that will work. One of the manifestations of our incessant rush to advance ourselves faster than our brother, which isn't always for negative reasons. I mean, there are some talented people who have a lot to contribute, and the only way to, in this world, to contribute, or one of the only ways, is to get money, and the only way to get money is to get involved in some businesses which may or may not be morally sustainable in the long term. So it's understandable the system pushes us in the direction of immoral behaviour, not always for bad motive. But we've however you look at it, our behaviour as regards health services, as regards governments, as regards corruption, as regards all sorts of, I mean, you know, in this country, when our health service fails because it's been corrupted by politicians, what they do is spend the money on an advertising campaign to tell everybody how wonderful it is, rather than sacking all the administrators, none of whom are trained as doctors, and fixing it, because either they can't or they won't, or they don't know how, or even if they did, they didn't want to because they're getting bribed by drugs companies or whatever it may be. I mean, recently there was this terrible spectacle of the Minister for Health filibustering a debate which would have seriously reduced the cost of the NHS of drugs by buying drugs that are outside of patents. When, you know, when a patent's expired after 20 years, you can get the drug a lot cheaper. A sort of naive young politician suggested that, trying to make drugs available for dying people who need them, and the minister's response was to filibuster that out of court, so that the drugs companies still get their money. And that's one tiny example of corruption, isn't it? But it's very pervasive, more so than it's ever been. And corruption is unsustainable. If you want to see why that is, think about cancer. Cancer is genetic corruption. And who wants to have one cancer cell? I mean, you might say, well, one cancer cell's not a problem, but it is, because it corrupts and makes 2, which makes 4, which makes 8, and before you know it, you're dead of cancer. And that is the danger of corruption. So we are morally corrupt in lots of ways. One way in which this manifests itself is not only do we treat our brother badly, and not only do we ignore God or treat him badly if we're trying to worship him. Sometimes we treat him badly whilst trying to do the right thing, but being misled by priests who claim to represent him but do not, and represent themselves or their institution, which is corrupted. We treat the planet badly. And that we live in an environmentally unsustainable way. We abuse the planet. There's a wonderful scene in Al Gore's video where you've got on the one hand gold, money, all the money in the world, and on the other hand you have the planet. And which do you want? And it's a difficult decision when your job, he said, depends upon you deciding to go for the money. I mean, you know, if your job depends on you doing something that's morally or environmentally unsustainable, what do? We've all made that mistake. And for whatever reason, we're living in a morally unsustainable way, and that translates into living in an environmentally unsustainable way, and that translates into global warming, and that translates into a tipping point for the planet Earth, where, I mean, if you heat up a human being by 3 degrees centigrade, you kill him. How do we know if you heat up the planet by 3 degrees centigrade it won't kill us? It certainly won't kill the planet. It's stronger than us. And so there will be a point at which, if you heat the planet up to that point, you get, well, obviously if you heat the planet up at all, you get more volcanoes. I am guessing that if you heat the planet up by some amount, somewhere around 3 degrees C, possibly less, you will get the planet to the point where it does indeed vomit us out. And I'm not really guessing that. That's scripture, that will occur. I'm guessing that it's caused by a form of global warming, but it could be caused by nuclear war and other things too. But put it like this, if you abuse the planet enough, it will react, and the reaction will be it vomits you out. That's it sneezing, because you are an irritant. And it's designed to do that, and that's what the scripture that the land will vomit out people who behave morally incorrectly is all about. So here's how it works, as we understand it. There are those of us who can learn that we need to be live in a morally sustainable and therefore environmentally sustainable way, or environmentally sustainable and therefore morally sustainable way, without having to see the consequences of not doing that. They're the people who can learn the lesson at school without having to do the practical. They can learn it from theory. They can just see it in their minds. It's obvious to them. Then there are people who need to see a bit of the planet screwing up in order to learn it. Then there are people who, however much the planet is screwed up, they'll just think, well look, we can push it a bit further, I can make another 50 grand and I'll just get away with it and hopefully I'll be alright, not so sure about my kids or my grandkids, but you know, they can fend for themselves, they're lucky I brought them into the world, I need that 50 grand more than I need to worry about whether I'm going to blow up the world. And that normally works until the point comes when it doesn't. Those guys are not going to learn the message that if you don't adopt a set of laws that makes a free will society morally sustainable, if you don't adopt a set of morally sustainable laws society-wide and enforce them, you're finished. They won't learn it. So what's God going to do with them? Well, He's going to let them. The only way they'll learn it is that they see it happen. They believe what they want to believe. You know, they believe what makes them a prophet. They believe what gives them status. They believe what they think improves their life. They don't believe what's true. unless what's true improves their status all their life, in their opinion. So this is what's going to happen. God will, 50% of us will get the message, theoretically. Then there'll be another 50% who don't get the message. So the plan is that God will remove the 50% who do get the message, or look up, in fact 25% of them he'll remove in an ark, 25% of them he will look after through the impending volcanic eruption, which is the fire that Peter talks about in his letters, the final flood, which is of lava rather than of water, stored up for fire, says Peter, the planet. And in 2 Peter. So a quarter go in the ark, a quarter get protected through that lava flood, and the other half get killed by the lava flood and go to hell, where God resurrects them and effectively says to them, okay boys, do you see what you did wrong here? And if they don't, he'll show them the video, and they will see for themselves that the inevitable result of disobeying whatever the minimum set of morally sustainable laws is that society destroys itself. I mean, that's the definition of moral sustainability. It's a set of laws which you need to obey to keep a society going. And the minimum set of such laws, in my understanding, is Christianity, basically. 10 Commandments plus the 2 of Jesus, which was to love your brother as yourself and love God with your whole heart, strength and mind. So that's the plan. The plan is that as many people who can learn the lesson before the world is self-annihilated, and it has to be self-annihilated. Because otherwise, what do they learn if God says, oh, I'm fed up with this, I'm going to wipe the place out? Nobody learns anything other than God's got a bad temper. What we have to learn is that we will wipe ourselves out unless we obey his laws, which are for our benefit. I'm sure Satan will depict it as, well, God threw a fit and wiped the planet out. That isn't what's going on. What will happen is we will wipe ourselves out unless we live in an environmentally sustainable and morally sustainable way. And some people will get that, but not enough people will get it to stop it happening. And it's important that it does happen, because that is the only way that the people who cannot learn anything theoretically will learn it. And even then, a lot of them won't learn it, but some of them will. And that, and God, it's God's job to teach us moral sustainability. That is the job of a God, basically. And the only way, logically, he can do that is to show us the results of living in an unsustainable way. And then, of course, you immediately start a kingdom after that, where you do the opposite, which will be something that people will totally appreciate. I mean, no one is going to appreciate, well, nobody appreciates peace unless they've seen war. And no one will appreciate lack of corruption unless they've seen corruption. And no one will appreciate morality unless they've seen immorality. And this is the knowledge of good and bad. You get it both. You can't really get one without the other. Alright, so here's my example of corruption, which I quite like. So imagine that society is a boat floating on the ocean. And corruption is holes in the boat. And technology is our capability to pump water out of the boat. And this is so we've done the Armageddon equation. Now we're going to do the corruption equilibrium. This is the balance of corruption. House prices in any country are always just out of everybody's reach. That is the market. If they were in everybody's reach, we'd all buy them. So they have to be just out of everybody's reach, because there's a limited supply and a big demand. That's a market equilibrium. But there is also an equilibrium in corruption, and it works like this. So before the Industrial Revolution, you didn't have a very good pump, or you had to do it by hand. So, you couldn't pump that much water out of the boat. So if the boat had a reasonably sized hole, it would sink. Therefore, the boat didn't have a reasonably sized hole. The society wasn't that corrupt, because if it had been corrupt, it would have sunk. Then the Industrial Revolution came along, and they invented the steam engine, and you got a better pump. That meant that the boat could have a bigger hole in it and still stay afloat, because you could pump the water out of this with this pump. So society got better technology and became more corrupt. Then they invented the electric motor, and you could have an even better pump. What that meant is technology got better, and the boat could have a bigger hole and still float, and so it got a bigger hole and still floated. Then they invented the nuclear-powered water jet pump, which can pump goodness knows how many gallons straight out of the boat. And what happened is the hole became bigger than the boat, and that's where we are now. And that's the purpose of that illustration is to show that due to market forces, which exist for corruption as much as anything else, better technology just makes things more corrupt, unfortunately. I mean, if you could ask yourself the question, if you look at today at the way we manufacture cars with robots and computers with robots, and everything is so much more technologically advanced and sophisticated than it was 100 years ago. Why is it that we all have to work more than 40 hours a week to make a living? Why is that? Surely, if our technology is 100 times better than it was 100 years ago, we should only have to work 1/100th of 40 hours a week, or whatever that is, less than half an hour, 20 minutes a week or something, 25 minutes a week. Why are we working more than that? The answer is corruption. Any slack in the system goes in, the market forces take it up. And the majority of that goes into corruption. We are basically becoming more and more parasitic as a society. We have more and more public sector bureaucrats, and half the people in the private sector are doing nothing other than being parasites. There are some incredibly unparasitic companies, and vice versa. But it's like the other way to look at it is that the glue that's holding society together is getting weaker. So although we've got much stronger parts, they're not held together so well. Many ways to look at it, but the bottom line is, it is insufficient to improve technology. It doesn't work. You have to improve morality, and you have to fight corruption. Otherwise, well, as regards the corruption equilibrium, if you're going to get better technology, you need better resistance to corruption, or all you will do is enable more corruption to occur, and the whole thing's kept afloat by the technology. That's where we are now. So, the famous expression, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That technological power is a form of power. So absolute technological power will corrupt us absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is an example of this is, when the calculator was invented, we all forgot how to add up. And when the TV was invented, we all stopped being able to entertain ourselves. And now that we've got the iPhone 6 and texting and everything, we can't spell anymore, and we'll reach the point where you can't hold a conversation if we carry on like this. I mean, the internet is wonderful, but as a result, nobody can do research anymore in a library. They can do it on the internet. And you have to be very careful with technology. I'm not a Luddite. Well, I am a Luddite in some ways, but I run technology companies, and I love technology. But we have to get it in its rightful place, and I've largely given up technology to try and advance morality through the Lord's Witnesses Church. Okay, that's corruption, and that's the Armageddon equation. Thank you.